Mito Yamamoto is such a beautiful man, so much so that women drool over his body anywhere he goes. When he was younger, Mito lost both his parents to a house fire and has been a social reject ever since. After losing his job as a waiter, Mito happens to stumble into a cafe where he meets one of the senior workers there, Ruka Saotome, who's also a vampire. Ruka invites him to a special room so he can lick his hands to taste his blood. Then, one thing happens after the other, and in due time, Mito finds himself living with Ruka in his dormitory. What could have happened between both of them as their platonic relationship strengthened with each passing day? Will Ruka eventually learn the dangerous secret Mito is keeping from him, or will he remain in the dark? Stick around to find out. In the opening scene, the young protagonist Mito is seen standing at the edge of a bridge as he thinks hard about his decision to end things right there in the thundering rain. After giving his next action enough thought, he leaps forward and falls to the river below him. Halfway through the fall, he changes his mind and decides against dying that night. Sadly for him, it was already too late as the Grim Reaper was already at the door, just waiting for him to strike the surface of the water beneath him. Just as he's about to touch the water, a miracle happens, and a white-haired man dressed in a black robe and a cape catches him mid-air and sinks his two fangs into Mito's plush body to drink about a pint of his blood. When he's done, he takes him back to the top of the bridge as the current scene fades to the next. In the next scene, vampires from all over the world gather in their leader's castle, which is situated in their realm, for their annual meeting to discuss the state of things in the human realm. The host of the meeting shushes the growing ruckus and reads out the most important details of their meeting for that day. She reminds them of the requirements needed by the next Lord of the Vampires and tells them that such a vampire must have extraordinary powers and must have found their life partner. Not only that, they also need to make sure that they've received the partner's blood. Any vampire that meets such conditions can be considered worthy of the throne. After reading out the requirements for the vampiric bunch, they all murmur about their favorites and debate over the best candidate to take over the throne. On the other side of the world, Mito gets fired from the restaurant where he worked as a waiter for sleeping in their workplace. Now, the real reason why he's being fired is because he's too hot for the ladies to handle, and the men dining in the restaurant were jealous that the ladies they were courting all wanted to be with him. Even as he's being fired, the ladies are all over the restaurant searching up and down for him. Mito ignores them and begs the manager to let him work there at least until he makes enough money to rent his place. This way, he won't have to bother sleeping there at all. Sadly, the manager couldn't afford to lose all his male customers, even if they were being petty for having such a handsome person stealing all the girls. Plus, the manager seems to think that it'll be easy for someone as pretty as Mito to get a job anywhere, so he should be fine on his own. Mito keeps his head down as he wanders the streets to search for greener pastures. On his way through the streets, a group of high school girls find him lacking and stare intently at him. Mito catches them staring and talking about him, so he gazes at them. The girls shriek over the beautiful boy's face and run away like a bunch of scared chickens. After they're gone, Mito checks his purse and realizes that he has only 12 yen left with him. Mito takes a seat behind an AC outlet unit and calls for his parents to come help him out in the pinch he's in. Just then, he suddenly remembers that his father and mother are both in heaven, so there's nothing they can do for him now that he's in the pinch. Apparently, the entire incident happened when Mito was around 8 to 10 years old. That night was unlike any other night when his house burned down with his parents inside. Somehow, he managed to survive the incident, but life never remained the same for him. The very next day after the incident, Mito returned to what used to be his house and found it all burnt and destroyed. What's even worse is the fact that he completely forgot how the fire started. All he could remember was that he survived the incident. As he checks through the rubble for any remains of his parents, he finds a family photo he took of them and gets very sad. Months later, Mito gets transferred from family to family as a foster kid. As expected, almost nobody wanted to deal with him because they thought he was a weird kid for being the only survivor. So, he was treated as a nuisance in every family house he was sent to. Eventually, when he got old enough to take care of himself, his last foster family threw him out and told him to go get a job with his pretty face. As it turns out, most of the families he was sent to were threatened with him surpassing them if he later gets a grip on life. They were scared that his good looks might end up getting him more fame and glory, while they continued rotting in the selfish holes they call houses. Anyways, Mito spent about a year of his life going from shop to shop searching for a job that could sustain his life. After getting rejected so many times, he finally found the ramen shop that he was fired from just that day. Life sure was tough for the little man, But our boy never gave up. After that quick rethink of his life decisions, Mito gets up and decides to go search for another job. Then, a cafe managed by another pretty boy opens up for the day, and one of the most popular chefs and servers there, Ruka, serves his first customers for the day, all of whom are ladies looking for sweet treats. Mito, on the other hand, keeps on strumming through the streets to find somewhere to stay. Soon after, the rain begins, and there's a heavy downpour. While everyone whips out their umbrellas to protect them from the rain, Mito has nothing to help keep him warm. As such, he places his bag on his head and runs under the patio of a familiar cafe. There, he finds out that he's been drenched in heavy rain and needs a change of clothes. However, he couldn't maintain his composure as his body was already getting weaker from lack of food. Without even knowing it, he staggers and crashes into the cafe, destroying a vase while he's at it. Everyone in the restaurant, including Ruka, stops to check out the unwanted stranger who just barged into their cafe. Mito gets very flustered by his mistake and tries his hardest to pick up the pieces of the vase that he broke. While he's at it, one of the pieces stabs his hands and it stings him like crazy. Just then, Ruka came behind him and touched Mito suspiciously. He inches closer to the bleeding finger and keeps himself from tasting the blood on the injured finger. Seconds later, he leads Mito to another room and exposes his fangs to him. Surprised, Mito asks him what he is about to do to him, but then Ruka keeps his mouth shut and lets his actions speak better. When it comes down to it, he licks the blood off Mito's fingers and nearly dies from the disgusting taste of the blood. He doesn't hide his disgust either, as he chokes on the texture and taste of the blood. Mito asks him to tell him what happened to his blood, and Ruka tells him it tastes like crap. Mito gets very angry and asks the vampire in front of him why he tasted the blood anyway, and Ruka tells him that he was enticed by the color of the blood. Eventually, he chases Mito out of the cafe and tells him never to come back there again. Mito rushes out of the cafe and continues on his merry way. Shortly after he's gone, Komori, Ruka's butler and fellow vampire, shows up in their secret room to talk to him about his abstinence from human blood. Ruka tells him how awful and disgusting Mito's blood tasted, but then Komori tells him that such bad-tasting blood is usually found in a human that's been unloved for a while. Naturally, in women who are loved for most of their lives, their blood tastes pristine, but then again, Ruka wasn't interested in drinking women's blood. Now that he's found a man, he realizes that men's blood might not taste that great either. After explaining the strange concept to the surprised Ruka, Komori advises Ruka to raise Mito to be loved so he can be his thrall. Ruka thinks about the possibility of such a thing happening, but then he decides against it and tells Komori not to tell him what to do. Komori gets pissed at his disrespect and switches his personality to his real one, Aka, the founder of the vampire group. Now Ruka can't boss him around like before, so he takes his time to explain what's at stake here for Ruka. Being the only person that the founder has chosen to take his place on the throne, it's only natural that Ruka has enemies in their home world. Once again, the founder makes sure to remind him of his mission there on Earth. Before Ruka could respond, one of his co-workers showed up to call him back to the service floor. Ruka leaves the room he was in and attends to all the customers for the remaining hours of the day. When he's done, he takes a break before heading home to drink his signature strawberry juice. One of his co-workers shows up to talk about his experience at work that day, and Ruka tells him just how bad and gross his mouth feels. In the end, he considers Komori's words and decides to do something about Mito. In the meantime, Mito strolls in the freezing cold rain and stands atop a bridge, wondering his best exit strategy to this cold, cruel life he's been forced to live. Without giving it a second thought, he climbs over the bridge and thinks about letting go of his life since nobody seems to like him at all. Just then, he decides against it and refuses to give up on life. However, it was already too late for him as his hand slipped and fell. Mito falls to the river as the first scene recreates itself. Thankfully, Ruka came through for him at the best possible time and caught him mid-air. He asks Mito if he's doing okay, and Mito starts crying like a baby. He seems to be very happy that someone finally cared that much about his sorry ass. Ruka tells him not to worry too much about it, and then he sinks his fangs into Mito's neck and drinks a good amount of his blood before taking him back up to question his actions earlier. Mito tells him he jumped because nobody needed him, and he felt useless. Ruka, after hearing all he had to say, tells him he'd be taking him in as his thrall, so he would feel needed. Mito, however, thinks about the reality of Ruka being a vampire. He faints shortly afterward and gets carried to another building by Ruka, the vampire. He wakes up moments later after being carried around and finds himself on a bed with a cat standing near him. He stands up and checks around him for any signs of life, only to see Ruka, his savior, sitting comfortably near him. Ruka tells him he's currently at the boys' dormitory at Hijirigaoka Boys Academy. After listening to everything Ruka had to say, Mito finally decides to be his thrall. However, Ruka wasn't so fond of her that he pushed her into the bathroom to change up so he could leave his dorm when he was free. Mito kept begging his benefactor to take him in and teach him how to be loved. However, Ruka wasn't so sure he could tolerate an irritating person as his thrall. Ultimately, he accepts Mito's request and keeps him as his thrall. Mito gets very happy to hear that from him and closes the door behind him to keep his body from Ruka. When he's sure that he's alone, he removes his clothes and checks himself out in the mirror. Just then, Ruka commends him for being so eager to help him out with his thrall problem, seeing as it's physically impossible for him to suck women's blood. At that point, Mito removes his clothes and wig to reveal himself as a biological woman. What will she do now that he has to keep such a dangerous secret from her new vampire romance person, Ruka? Later that night, Komori and a few other vampires pass by Ruka's dorm and wonder what his next move is going to be. The next morning, Mito wakes up to find the annoying cat and Ruka sleeping softly beside him. He screams at the top of his lungs as he's super shocked to find the handsome vampire sleeping so close to him, her. At the time, Ruka didn't know that Mito was a biological woman, so he just slept like a normal guy would. In his terms, this was one of his ways to make Mito feel loved, so that in due time, his blood would get tastier. Without even thinking much of it, Ruka carries his household cat and fondles it in front of Mito. Mito, on the other hand, remembers everything that transpired the previous day, including the part where Ruka accepted him to stay over with him in his dorm in exchange for him being his thrall. There's one thing Mito was scared of at the moment, and that's the fact that he's a biological woman who's pretending to be a normal man. If she's to survive in that academy, she needs to make sure she keeps that secret a secret. Just then, Ruka pulls her back to the bed to get his breakfast. Without even asking for permission, he sinks both his fangs into Mito's neck and drains her blood to satisfy his morning hunger. While he's at it, Mito asks if sucking her blood every morning is going to be a normal thing she has to get used to, especially since he never told her that he was going to be draining some pints of her blood every morning. Ruka finishes drinking his breakfast, and he gets very irritated from the disgusting taste of Mito's blood. Mito touches the wound on her neck and complains to Ruka for leaving her neck to be filled with holes. Ruka, on the other hand, tells her not to worry about the hole wounds caused by his fangs. He then tells her to hold still while he uses some healing magic to seal up those holes she was complaining about. Mito stares into his handsome face and begins to imagine life with him. But when her wounds are healed, she returns to normal. She drowns herself in thought as she realizes that she has to make sure she gets loved by the guy if she's to continue staying there with him. And if her blood doesn't taste good soon, Ruka might kick her out. With that, a bat enters the dorm room and catches Mito's attention. Before she could say a thing, the bat changes into Ruka's butler, Komori, and gives her a brand new school uniform to put on, as she's now been officially enrolled into the academy as a male student. Mind you, nobody knows Mito is a girl pretending to be a boy, so she can find a place to stay. About an hour later, Ruka takes Mito to his school. In the hallway, Mito thinks about the kind of personality she's to put up with if she wants to convince everyone that she's a biological boy. Ruka catches her spacing out and tells her not to get too nervous about her first day in a boys' school. He tells her the boys there are nice, and he's also there to protect him, just in case anybody tries to bully her. With that, they get into the classroom, and Ruka tells Mito to introduce herself as a new transfer student who came to their school yesterday. Mito does the needful and gets shocked when the boys act so chill around her, thinking she is just a fellow boy. The blonde who was working in the cafe with Ruka introduced himself as Takara Kagurazaka and told Mito to help him out with the girls so that he could find his lover there. Ruka gets questioned by one of his colleagues about Mito, thinking he is Ruka's family or something. Ruka lets him know that he just knows Mito and that he's no relative of his. Amid the discussions and hubbub, a Raz student enters the class and stares at Mito before taking his seat. Mito takes note of the handsome guy as she continues attending to the other boys. Later on, Ruka walks up to Mito and finds her slushing on her desk as she thinks about what to do. He asks her to follow him to the cafe so they can work together, and Ruka tags along. On getting to the cafe, Komori ushers them to get changed into their work clothes. Ruka takes Mito to the changing room and removes his shirt nonchalantly to get changed into his work clothes. Naturally, Mito shrieks in admiration after seeing Ruka's abs and nice chest. She turns her back on him to give him some time to freshen up, but then Ruka faces her back and carelessly removes her shirt to expose her bare body. Scared of being exposed, Mito pushes his hands away from her body and chases him out of the changing room so she can have her privacy and change into her work clothes without any issues. She heaves a sigh of relief as she realizes she narrowly escaped being exposed. Eventually, she gets changed and joins the others outside in the serving room. Takara tells her to feel comfortable with the other co-workers, and in due time, he introduces Mito to the guy with purple hair, who's as cute as a doll. He calls over to the purple-haired dude, Juri, to come say hi and help Mito out. But Juri ignores her and gives her the death stare. Mito wonders if bro was going through a breakup or something, but that wasn't her problem. As she scans the room for any signs she might be missing, she suddenly hears all the girls in the room frolicking around Ruka, asking him for his best strawberry recipe. As we all know, Ruka is a handsome dude, so the girls were naturally attracted to him. Mito gets very distraught and sad about Ruka fondling those girls. She gets jealous of those girls tasting much better than she does. Not that Ruka cares anyway. While attending to the girls, he calls Mito and asks her to help him get some dried fruit in the pantry. Mito walks into the pantry and stops to think about her uselessness to her benefactor, Ruka. Just then, Juri catches her alone in the pantry and accuses her of conspiring against Ruka to harm him. Mito keeps quiet as Juri inches closer to her and accuses her of keeping a secret that could harm Ruka. He was right though. Mito was hiding a secret, but it would not kill Ruka at all. Juri keeps pushing Mito to the shelf where she runs into the shelf, shakes it, and manages to spill some pots down towards her head. Thankfully, Ruka came at the right time to protect her head from being hit by the pot. He allows the pot to hit his head so that he gets the injury instead of his precious thrall. Mito helps him up and walks with him to the dark dorm room. After making sure he's almost all right, Mito removes her shirt and spreads herself on the bed so that Ruka can come to suck some of her blood. When he does, he chokes on some blood and makes Mito feel like he is only choking because her blood tastes bad. Ruka notices this and tells her that he only choked from drinking the blood too fast. Now that he's good to go, he takes out a weird necklace with a heart-shaped diamond pendant thingy and places it around her neck. Mito asks him what the necklace is all for, and Ruka tells her that it's a vampiric item called the Sangsukri, and it measures the taste of human blood. Currently, it has a bright blue hue to it to signify dull-tasting blood. However, when she ripens, the color of the Sangsukri turns strawberry red. Now that she has Ruka in a good mood, Mito asks him why he's so insistent on not drinking female blood. To explain himself, Ruka lets his bat open the secret door in his dorm room, which he does. From the looks of things, it turns out that Ruka was only interested in anime girls or 2D ladies. Mito is shocked to see Ruka display absolute childishness as he raves on about his love for anime ladies. Kimuro also complains about Ruka's selfishness and overflowing love for anime girls. Mito, on the other hand, is just glad that Ruka didn't have to kill a human woman or drain out all the blood in a female to get his feelings towards women's blood. With that, she chuckles and teases Ruka, who had a boyish fight with her. Mito starts getting comfortable being around Ruka, even if she's lying to him. The next day, Mito rushes to the school cafeteria to get some breakfast. She gets some noodles and downs it like a hungry pig. Juri and Takara show up later to ask about Ruka's health after the incident that Juri caused the previous day. Mito thinks about the weird things Ruka did in his room the previous night and tells them that he's doing perfectly fine. Takara and Juri can rest easy now, so Takara walks off to get some ramen, while Juri stays and apologizes for his behavior the previous day. Mito brings him closer and tells him that she also has a secret just like he suspected, but she doesn't tell him the secret. If one thing, she assures him that her secret will never harm Ruka in any way. With this, Juri accepts the fact that everyone has secrets, so he promises to stop investigating her. He also prepares himself to tell Mito his secret, but Takara shows up to spoil the fun. As they laugh and joke around, the deep buzz of a motorcycle gets louder and louder until it finally stops in front of their school. Mito asks her colleagues who the weird new guy is, and Juri tells her he's Nikaido Ren, the bad boy of their school, who seems to have a destructive side. Mito stops herself from thinking about him, but then she gets shocked when she finds the man standing in front of her dorm door. Without even asking for permission, Ren drags her to the backyard to talk some sense into her head. On getting there, he slams his hand into the wall and asks her if she knows Ruka's a vampire. Mito is shocked to hear this, but she keeps her cool. Ren didn't seem to think she was a girl, so he treated her like he would treat another guy. He figures out that she must know Ruka's true identity. He moves on to ask her why she's still moving with him. Before she can say a thing, Ruka shows up and calls Ren a coward for not being able to settle his differences face to face. Ren tells him he's one to talk and walks away. After he's gone, Ruka checks the necklace and finds out that the necklace is still blue. Without thinking, he sinks his teeth into her neck and drinks her blood right there. Mito tells him to stop doing that so they don't get caught by an onlooker. Rather than take what Mito is saying to heart, Ruka continues talking about how weird she's acting. Mito ends up getting disgusted at someone she was supposedly worried about, and she runs away. Ruka gets a very weird feeling about Mito that he couldn't explain. Later on, everyone gets ready for martial arts class. Mito is shocked at how athletic Nikaido Ren is later paired up to fight him. When they get a chance to fight, Ren sees the wound on her neck, slams her down, and drags her to the backyard to talk things out with her. He asks her if she's been allowing herself to be Ruka's blood bag. Before she could say a thing, Ren tells her to bail out now and get back home, or else she stands losing everything and everyone she's ever known in her life. After running his mouth, he finally gives Mito a chance to speak, and she gets her chance. She tells him not to give him any more bullshit about her losing everything, when she's already lost everything she's ever worked for. The only person who's shown her any real love in her life is none other than Ruka. Ren hears this and tells her that he's worried about her safety so much that he wants to protect her. Mito, who wants to be with Ruka, holds his hand and tells him to give her a chance to protect Ruka so she can prove to him that Ruka isn't a bad person. With this, Ren follows her back to class without knowing that Ruka was listening to their conversation the entire time. Bro was pretty lost in thought as he found himself having some intense feelings for Mito. Later that night, Ren spends his night thinking about his childhood and how badly he was ostracized from his neighborhood. Back when he was younger, Ren was a little rougher with the kids back then, so everyone was scared to play with him. The only person who recognized him as a human being was his mother, who always reminded Ren that she loved him greatly. Now, he's found another person like his mom, and that person is no other than Mito Yamamoto.